Hi, this is Mike Hendrickson from Velocity 2018 in San Jose. I'm here with Brett from Google Cloud. Brett, how you doing?
Doing well. Hi, Mike.
Hi. So you're going to talk about managed database services. What does that mean?
A managed database service takes the IT stack or the technology stack that's required to run a database. So everything from the server itself, the operating system, the database, of course, and then more complex technologies like replication and automatic failover for high availability, takes the whole stack and turns that into an API call, such that a DevOps team can quickly, again with an API call, turn up a very simple development database or a much more complex production-grade database.
So why would that be necessary? I mean, why do they want to turn one up quickly? Give me an example.
Yeah, what we've seen some of our users, especially those who have dedicated DevOps team interested in, is running many smaller databases. They have their own internal customers, development teams, who wish to start projects and want to very quickly provision a database. 10 years ago, that would mean someone installing a database, building a server, if you will. Today, DevOps teams are very interested in that rapid turnup because their internal customers or their processes demand it as well.
So is this a scaling, does it help scaling happen?
It helps scaling in two ways, and I mentioned that we're seeing DevOps teams particularly interested in running many smaller databases, especially when they're using open source databases like MySQL and Postgres. So from a scale point of view, you can think of this as the quantity of these databases, running hundreds or even thousands rather than tens or 50s from days of old. To be sure, these teams are also dealing with scale in an individual databases that grow very large. And Google Cloud has technologies like Cloud Spanner that allow those teams to reach scale that they couldn't do even 5 years ago.
So what kind of companies do you see, being at Google, that are doing this managed services? Who are the likely suspects here?
Sure. In the past, we've seen companies who are cloud native, who've really started in the cloud, right, being most open to managed services. That said, we're seeing now a shift to more traditional enterprises who are taking on a DevOps model, and especially for their new applications, thinking about architectures that very much resemble the cloud natives as opposed to traditional IT.
So when you used an important term, thinking about the architecture. Are people thinking about managed database services in their architecture now when they're spinning up new projects and new systems? Are they actually starting to think that way?
They are. I think we've seen it especially paired with the notion of continuous integration and continuous development, where these teams historically have struggled to do that with databases. With managed database, it helps them achieve some of those goals, and so you can imagine, especially in the architecture of certain applications. I'll give one example. We see this quite frequently with our SaaS providers, or software as a service providers. They wish to deliver their end users, of which there are many, the same technology stack in a repeatable fashion, which means they may end up attempting to manage tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of database systems. And taking on that type of architecture without a managed database service would be really cumbersome and potentially problematic.
Is there a trend that's kind of inspiring all this? Is this part of transformation, or what is the impetus for making this managed database services happen?
I think a few trends. I'll start with a shift from monolithic applications, large applications, which were traditionally backed by a monolithic large database. We've seen those applications, or that notion, kind of go by the wayside in favor of a microservice architecture-based application. Microservices are allowing users to decentralize data management, meaning they are able to back each microservice to build up this application with its own individual database or storage service. So you can match the microservice with exactly the right type of database. I deal with customers who select Cloud SQL, a relational database service, to back some of their microservices, and other Google databases like Cloud Spanner, for example, for other microservices as part of a single application. We've also noticed that because cloud pricing is linear in nature, which hasn't historically been true in an on-premise environment, we've seen that has essentially removed a constraint from the past, where today a 2 CPU core database server costs exactly half as much as a 4 CPU database server. So you can imagine these customers splitting these things ever smaller, and it's not really showing up in their invoice as a cost increase like it used to. All of this, again, gets essentially amplified when you're talking about software as a service providers. You're taking this and multiplying it by the number of end users they have.
So those are some of the trends leading this. Now, like everything that is kind of new on the market or being used more and more, there are trade-offs. And there's usually good and bad. So what are the trade-offs with the managed database service?
Yeah, one trade-off that I see come up almost immediately, especially with a microservices architecture, which we advocate for. Customers have a join problem. They say, okay, I have built my application with a number of microservices, each of which is backed by an individual storage service. Now, how do I run a report to understand usage across the application? And so we commonly advise customers to think about ways to automate the copying or movement of data from each of those storage systems to a central aggregation point, to an analytics system, for example, where then you can report and query, for example. That's usually one of the kind of the first challenges that folks moving to this style of architecture will run into.
Is that like an orchestration issue? Like getting the data to all come together in one place? And
I think you can characterize it as that. In general, most cloud storage services and managed database services have APIs that allow you to export data and to automate some of this, but there very much is initially an orchestration problem where you want to make sure you've coordinated the data collection across these things so that then you can go run a report.
So if you look at managed database systems where you are today and the trends that have kind of led us here, where do you see the market in the next 6 months and then the market on the longer term?
Yeah, our customers continue to push us with respect to scale in terms of quantity of databases. So for example, if you imagine yourself trying to manage 10,000 databases, a managed database service today helps you do that to a certain extent. But there's really no way you're going to go, for example, and size each of these databases by hand when you have 10,000 or more. So we get common requests to auto-scale databases, to auto-tune databases. I think you'll see investment well beyond 6 months in those areas. More near term, customers are asking us to help them do things in batch. Let me apply a tag or a label to a group of these databases so that then my automation can later apply a change to that particular group. And thinking about how you manifest APIs or UIs that allow folks to manage these things in large groups or at scale.
Could you ever apply intelligence to that scaling, like say auto scale? Are we going to get to a point where AI and machine learning and everything can help figure out what you should be scaling to?
Well, I think from Google you'll see a consistent push to bring ML and artificial intelligence to many of its cloud products. That's been a core concept for Google Cloud. I don't think Cloud SQL or managed databases will be any exception.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if you were to look on the really long term, do you see this as something that's earth-shattering or just part of the fabric of what everyone has to do in the future?
Well, I have bias here, but I can say that the Cloud SQL team very much is excited about the notion of changing the way people use databases. Database is a long-lived technology. It's been used in a certain way for the last 20 years. We'd like to see that change very dramatically and hopefully beneficially for end users of databases. So I think it's going to be transformative, but again, I've got some bias.
Excellent. Well, Brett, we look forward to that journey in the next 12 months. We'll see how it goes.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.